Whether you're specializing in software engineering or game development or web development, class is an important concept to know in your journey to programming. In today's video, we're going to be integrating real-world concepts and things into classes. I'm teaching beginner-friendly Python syntax in order, so if you want to start from the very first video, which is learn how to code in 30 minutes, go from there. Watch my other videos, they're relatively short. We're going in like a lateral incline as to what are like the easiest syntax to learn, and then the medium syntax, and then the hard syntax, and then we're going to jump into projects and just programming more intense, real-world related concepts and code. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Embersunn. I go by Embersunn on most of my social media platforms, just in case you guys want to follow. I post coding related concepts and flashcards, and I also discuss some of the topics that I'm learning in my university, along with some really cool programming pictures and just intense videos of my setup. But let's go ahead and jump into the video. Classes is probably one of the most important concepts you're going to learn within Python 3. Classes represent real-world things and situations, and we're going to be creating objects based on these classes. Now, in order to understand what classes are, we have to understand the importance of object-oriented programming, because object-oriented programming is one of the most effective approaches in writing software. Object-oriented programming, or otherwise known as OOP, is a style of programming based on the concepts of objects and how data and code can be formed in fields and procedures. And as you can see, these little flashcards are terms that basically encompass and create what object-oriented programming is. We have encapsulation, abstraction, object, polymorphism, inheritance, but today we're going to focus on specifically class. Before we dive into the code, let's understand real quick what instantiation is. Instantiation is the development of an object created from a class. We're going to be using instantiation within the class that we form. We're going to get deeper into this concept as we're actually coding the class itself, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Let's begin by writing a simple class. We'll call this class student, where we will assign two pieces of information. We're going to assign the student's name and age, and we will also assign two behaviors, which we will be calling them present and absent. Now, it's important to capitalize names that we are referring to as students. So as you can see, if my class name is student, you want to make sure that you're capitalizing that first letter. And just so we have an idea of what we are doing, I'm going to be using comments throughout the whole program in order for us to understand every single step that we're taking. So create and using So we finished our first method within the class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue writing the other two behavioral methods that we're going to need, and then I'm going to go back and explain to you exactly what everything does. I think it's going to be easier if we take that approach. Okay, first things first, let's discuss briefly the init method right here. A function that's part of a class is called a method. So this method is one that Python runs automatically whenever we create a new instance based on this class student. Make sure that you are using two underscores on both sides of init. If you use just one, the method won't be called automatically when you use your class. So you'll see that I put both right here. And the next thing to mention is our parameters right here, self, name, and age. Now we're going to take this as a rule, right? The self parameter is required when we are using this method, and it always has to be first before the others. So when Python calls this method later, the self argument will automatically pass, which, as you can see, we called it again here. Now let's look at the two variables, name and age. each one has the prefix self, y. So every prefix with self is available to every method in the class. We'll access these variables throughout any of the instances from the class. And this is called attributes. And here you'll see that we defined two other methods. First one is present, and then the second one is called absent. And these, present and absent, don't need additional information in order to run, so we just left them at self. Because like I said, self is a rule. You have to keep it as a parameter mandatory when you are creating or defining an object within a class. The idea of the program here, that we're using strings to kind of give like a simulation of how an attendance sheet would be. The idea of this program is that it's going to print out if a student is present or if a student is absent. So we defined two different behaviors here. If the student is present, we will integrate their name into the string and it will print out the student's name is present. And then vice versa, if the student is absent, it'll print out its name with the quote, it's absent, is absent. But we're not done with this program. Let's make an instance within this class that's already formed. So here we're telling Python to create a student whose name is Anna and whose age is 16. What Python does is it reads this line and calls over the init method that we created here. And the init method then creates an instance representing this specific student and sets the name and age attributes using the values we integrated. So these are the values that we integrated, okay? And since the init function has the two parameters name and age, what Python does is it integrates these two values in the same order that we've printed these out. So first name and then second age. Now, in order to access these attributes that we created within this instance, we wrote our variables followed by .name right here, and also followed by .age. Now, notice the dot notation. This dot notation that separates our variable from our parameter is incredibly important because we can use that same dot notation to call our behavioral methods in our student class. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make a second student and we're going to call over the behavioral defined methods present and absent. Okay, so here's our second student. His name is going to be John Smith and age 17. Now you can see here that we use the dot notation in order to first off write down our variable, the variables that we want to use, student 1 and student 2, and then we want the following two behavioral methods, present and absent, to work upon these two variables. So when we do run the program, you're going to see that it prints out our student information, Anna Lovelace, which was one of the first things we did. But also, you'll see that it prints out our first student's name, Anna Lovelace, and marks her as present, and our second student, John Smith, is marked as absent. So with what you know from the information that we created within this class, I want you guys to try it for yourself, right? So we're going to create a few more instances. You can actually create as many as you'll need for your class. There is no limit. But in this moment, I want you to pause the video here and try to create a third behavior that will print out the student's name, similar to what we did here, along with the string that says is tardy. So instead of present and absent, you want to create a third behavior that is going to be called tardy. Within that, create a string that says is tardy. And then you're going to come down here and call in that method by creating a third student. Now, just in case you get lost, I'm actually going to put in comments of where you would have to fill in the code. All right, so here are the comments. Create your third behavior here. Just imagine filling in this line here, and then create your third student below here, and then call in that behavioral method for that student below here. All right, so this is what you should have gotten. Anything similar that would actually run works. So here we defined our third behavior, which is going to be the tardy behavior. We defined this method. We made sure that we added the self parameter within that parentheses. We gave it our string. Then we created our third student here, student number 3. I named it Alec Baldwin. You know, considering the social dilemma around him right now, I thought it would be funny and befitting. Probably not that funny, but you know, it's befitting. And then I called in the behavioral method for the third student here. We put in that variable, student number 3, followed by that method, tardy. And when you run it, it should print out that third student's name, Alec Baldwin, is tardy. So personally, after I've learned something new, I like to create summary flashcards of every single important term or vocabulary that I have to digest. So here are some summary flashcards for what we just learned. We learned about class, what it is, the init method, what it does, why it's important, what attributes is, what object-oriented programming is, and why it's important to classes, how to access attributes within classes, and the importance of capitalizing a class when you create one. So I highlighted the capitalized S in red here for you guys. I'm also going to have a link below on the entire PowerPoint, so if you guys want to download it and keep it to yourselves, you definitely can. So you don't necessarily have to write these down if you don't want to. If you just want to keep them in this exact format, go ahead and download the link below. I love sharing educational content, and I do it almost at a daily basis within my other social media platforms. So if you would like to learn more about Python 3, if you'd like to keep up to date with the videos that I'm creating, if you would like to know when I'm creating the next video tutorial, go ahead and follow my Instagram. It's Embersunn. My Twitter is also Embersunn. Honestly, everything that's related to social media, I think, is Embersunn, unless I don't have it there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to click that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you guys can keep up to date with my future content. I will try to do a part 2 in classes where I'll be discussing how we can actually work with classes, how they functionalize in a real world setting, and how you can apply it into more software terms. So definitely keep yourselves updated with this channel. And leave a comment. Let me know what you guys thought of this tutorial. Stay safe, guys. Bye.